Alex had always been a man who thought he had everything under control. He had the job, the house, and the family. But something always seemed to slip through his fingers, like sand in the wind. His life revolved around his job as a driver, hauling goods across the city, picking up passengers at all hours. And while he was always busy, always hustling, he was never truly home. His wife, Sarah, and his 2 kids, Emma and Jack, had slowly become strangers to him. He had tried to make them understand, tried to convince himself that this was for their future. But every night, when he came home, the house felt colder, emptier. His kids barely recognized him because he usually came home late. His wife, once full of smiles and warmth, was now distant, her eyes filled with quiet frustration. Tonight, like every other night, Alex promised himself he'd do better. He'd come home early, he'd fix things, but as usual, work kept him longer than expected. His bus broke down on the way home again. It was always the same story, constant breakdowns, constant delays, never enough time. He pulled over to the side of the road, staring at the lifeless vehicle in front of him. It was late, the streets were empty, and all he could do was wait. The roadside assistance operator told him it would be at least an hour before he could arrive. He thought about Sarah at home, wondering where he was, probably worried. He couldn't help but feel guilty. When was the last time they had dinner together? When was the last time they talked without him checking his watch or thinking about work? He picked up his phone to call her, but before he could dial, it buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. Emma asked if you're coming home tonight. It's been days, Alex. I'm starting to wonder if you're ever coming back. He stared at the message for a moment, his chest tightening. He wanted to reply, to tell her that everything would be okay, that he'd make it up to her, but he couldn't. What could he say? He had already promised so many times before. The truth was, he didn't know how to fix it anymore. By the time the mechanic arrived and fixed the car, it was far too late. The streets were quiet, the city had gone to sleep. He was too exhausted to make the drive back home. But he had no choice. Sarah would be waiting for him, and he couldn't keep her waiting any longer. When he finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. He stood in front of the door, his hand hovering over the knob, wondering if it was even worth going in. Inside, Sarah was sitting on the couch, arms folded, eyes red from crying. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could he say? She didn't even look at him. She knew the drill. Where have you been, Alex? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I lost track of time, he said, his words sounding hollow even to him. Sarah didn't respond, just stared at him with that look he had come to dread. The one that said she was tired, tired of waiting, tired of being patient, tired of being alone. Emma had a school play that night. Jack had wanted to play soccer with him. They both wanted their father. But he was never there. Sarah was right. He had been so focused on the idea of providing for his family that he had lost sight of what they really needed. Him. Just him. Not the money, not the late-night drives, not the job that kept him away. She was tired of hearing promises he never kept. And so was he. But what else could he do? His job was all he had. Without it, he would be nothing. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the silence between him and Sarah felt like a weight pressing down on him. He thought about the messages he had seen earlier, about the empty house, about the kids who didn't even know when he was coming home next. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. This time it wasn't about the kids or the house. It was a photo of her at the school play, smiling and laughing with a man Alex didn't recognize. His stomach churned. She looked happy. Too happy. The comment underneath said it all, enjoying the night with an old friend while Alex works late again. Alex's heart sank. His hand trembled as he held the phone, staring at the image. She was moving on, and he hadn't even noticed. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that he had let it happen. In the morning, he tried to talk to her, but she was quiet. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said. "I'll change. I'll be here for you and the kids." But Sarah didn't believe him anymore. She had heard those words too many times before. She stood up, her eyes cold and distant. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Alex." The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. He had nothing left to say. He had run out of chances. In that moment, Alex realized he couldn't keep going like this. He couldn't keep driving away from his family, from his life. But was it too late? Could he fix it? Or had he already lost everything that mattered? The thought of leaving his job, of starting over, was terrifying. But what was the point of a job if he lost his family in the process? The next day, Alex drove to work, his mind clouded with doubt. But as he sat in the car, waiting for another fare, he made a decision. He had to change. He had to take control of his life again. But the question was, could he? And if he did, would it be enough to win Sarah back? Would it be enough to show his kids that he was truly there for them? Or would he lose it all for good? As the day passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. He was on the edge of losing everything, and he didn't know if he could pull himself back. But he had to try. He had no other choice. Alex couldn't shake the image of Sarah, smiling in that photo with someone else. It was all he could think about as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of his own guilt was crushing. His phone buzzed on the bedside table, but he didn't pick it up. It was Sarah again. He could feel it. He wasn't ready to face her, not yet. Not when everything was falling apart. He was used to running. Running from the truth, running from the pain, running from the consequences of his actions. But now, the truth was right in front of him, and there was no running anymore. It was like his whole life had caught up with him in one single moment. The next morning, he woke up late again. His alarm didn't go off, and by the time he checked his phone, there were a dozen missed calls from Sarah. He didn't call her back immediately. Instead, he went through the motions. He put on his shirt, grabbed a cup of coffee, and headed out the door, as if nothing had changed. As if everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. He knew that. Sarah knew that. On the drive to work, Alex's mind raced. The photo. The message. The empty house. How had everything gone so wrong? He had tried so hard, or at least he thought he had. He worked long hours, always picking up the next job, never asking for a break. He believed that if he kept working hard enough, everything else would fall into place. But it didn't. It never did. He pulled into the parking lot of the same old gas station, the same place he stopped every day before starting his shift. He grabbed his phone and stared at it, debating whether or not to call Sarah back. Every ring, every second he wasted, felt like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. He couldn't bear the thought of hearing the disappointment in her voice again, but he knew he had to face it. He couldn't keep pretending. With a deep breath, he finally dialed her number. It rang 3 times before she picked up. "Alex," she said, her voice colder than he remembered. "Where are you? The kids have been asking about you all morning. I need you here." "I know, Sarah. I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot," Alex replied, trying to sound calm, but his words felt empty. "I'll come home after my shift. We need to talk." "Talk?" Sarah's voice cracked. "What's there to talk about, Alex? You haven't been home in days. I don't even know who you are anymore. Alex felt a lump in his throat. I'm sorry. I know I've messed up. But I'm ready to fix it, Sarah. I swear. Just give me a chance. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, Alex thought she might hang up. But instead, she sighed. Fine. Come home when you're done, Alex. But don't think one conversation will change everything. She hung up before he could say anything else. He stared at the phone in his hand, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no idea how to fix it. But he had to try. The day went by slowly. Every fare he picked up felt like a distraction from the real problem. He had been driving for hours, but his mind was constantly at home. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Sarah. It was a picture of Emma, her eyes wide with excitement, holding up a drawing she had made for him. The note under it read, "Emma made this for you. She says she misses her daddy." Alex's heart broke in that moment. He missed her too. He missed all of them. He had become so caught up in his work, in the idea that he was providing, that he had lost sight of the real reason he was doing it. For them. His family. They weren't just part of the plan, they were the plan. But what had he done? He had let his family slip through his fingers, all for the sake of chasing after something that didn't matter in the end. The thought of losing them, really losing them, terrified him. He couldn't let it happen. Not like this. But he wasn't sure how to fix it. Was it too late? Had he already done too much damage? Finally, after hours of driving, he finished his last job of the day. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but he didn't want to go home. Not yet. Not when things were so uncertain. He pulled into a parking lot near a park, the same park where he used to take Emma and Jack to play when they were younger. He sat there for a long time, staring out at the empty swings, wondering if he could ever find his way back to that version of himself. The one who was present, who didn't just exist to pay bills and put food on the table, but who actually lived with his family. And then, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from his boss, the one who had sent him on so many late-night runs. "We need you to take another trip. It's urgent. Leave tonight." Alex stared at the screen. He was about to reply when he saw a missed call from Sarah. He hesitated for a second, then dialed her number. "Sarah," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Alex, where are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do anymore." The fear in her voice hit him like a punch. This was the moment. He couldn't keep running. He couldn't keep putting it off. "I'm coming home," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be there in an hour." Sarah didn't say anything. The line went dead. Alex drove home, but with every mile, his heart raced faster. What would happen when he got there? Would Sarah still be there? Would she even want to talk to him after everything? As he pulled into the driveway, he saw the lights on inside. The house was quiet, but Sarah was there. She was waiting for him. He walked inside, his shoes heavy with the weight of everything he had been running from. He could feel her eyes on him, and this time, it wasn't anger or disappointment that he saw in her gaze, it was fear. Fear that maybe this time, he wasn't coming home for good. "Alex," Sarah said softly, "are you finally ready to stay?" End of episode 1. Thank you very much for watching. Kindly subscribe to support my channel and don't forget to click on the like button. Also, do you think Sarah did wrong for not trusting her husband again because he never fulfilled his promises of coming home to spend more time with them? Let us know in the comment section, and don't forget share the video to a friend that you know that needs to watch this video. Thank you once again. See you in episode 2.